what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another video. It's your boy Deep Art, and we're back with another video. We got a special video for y'all today because we want to really expand on this topic of just training regimes, period. And lacking certain things but gaining certain things, right? In the aspect of that, like sometimes you can do certain things, maybe to access, or like maybe taking a rest day, right? Maybe you just really need rest because you might have been up for like 2 days straight. You know what I'm saying? Out of your environment, right? And you might just come back and need to take a rest, right? You need to take the day off. Or you need to rest to regulate your body, regulate your functioning, regulate your mind, regulate your system so you can continue functioning at the best capability, that you can, right? So if that's the case, sometimes when you take a rest day, you know what I'm saying, you're sort of separating yourself from environmental spaces. You know what I'm saying? Certain environmental spaces or certain activities that you've been, getting into, you know what I'm saying? I guess when you were initially in that environment are now, you're not getting those benefits from those environments anymore because you have, you've separated yourself from it, right? And now you're not getting the same benefits from those activities, from those functions, from all that stuff, right? And it goes deep into functions, right? It goes literal functions in terms of like maybe even like outlets, right? Playing basketball, an outlet itself generates an entirely different function from within the peripheral nervous system, right? And it generates an entirely different method or process of thinking or channeling, right? Neurotic channeling, right? That then allows you to be able to, think a specific sort of way, right? That might benefit you in a specific way or that you might need depending on how long or how much time you spent in that sort of function or that outlet, right? To develop a process of thinking, right? You know what I'm saying? So, that if that be the case, then it's just like sometimes when you take a break from these things, right, in order to regulate your body and regulate your mind, because sometimes you need to just, you probably need to reset your system, recalibrate your mind and body due to other factors or other, impedances or just other forms of life, just processes and just, experiences, circumstances, just, in sort of events of life that take place, that sort of cause this sort of irregularity, right? So might just be getting out of your environment right? Getting into new, I'll say getting out of your environment, right? For an extended period amount of time, right? You may have, gone without sleep. You may have gone, experienced whatever, right? And now, you come back, right? It's like, it would be easy to just say, and very simplistic to say, like, okay, just jump back into this and just do what you was doing before, right? But at the same time, your body, you got to take care of your body at the same time, right? It's not just function, functionality this, functionality that, functionality this. Sometimes it's like, your body has to be taken care of because of just, it has to be regulated and it has to be stabilized, right? Before, it makes more sense to go back into certain other, certain functions that you have maybe been in, right? You know what I'm saying? And that's the sort of thing, that we want to talk about in this video specifically because when you really look at it, you take functionalities in terms of what you take functionalities that you might do and might commit to at one point, right? And you look at the point, and you look at the point to where you might have to sort of regulate your body, just so that or make adjustments to regimes, right? In order for you to be able to sort of stabilize your body, to get you back into that form of functioning, which is the most important thing, right? And if that's the case in terms of what you're doing, okay, so the important thing is going to be, like we said, is like, how are you sort of regulating your body and how are you sort of regulating your functioning in terms of just like, if this is the process that I was established myself on, and this is the process that I was doing, right? You know what I'm saying? I look at like how I did this process right here, you know what I'm saying? And now I have to make sure that I'm sort of, the process of sort of nudging in certain details or analyzing and just making calculations to specific details and measurements, and taking those details, right, and being able to create some sort of regime to where I can regulate and stabilize you know, my functioning in terms of more of a calm manner, right? And more of a, stabilized manner. And that's the important thing, to really sort of consciously sort of implement and sort of just gauge and have, and just really take into account when you start to really function these things, right? Because like I said, right, you could be coming out of an environment or from into an environment, right? You know what I'm saying? And now trying to regulate your body, and you know what I'm saying, and sort of thing, it just doesn't take the same process and take the same format as if you was just to jump right back into the function, right? So what is the process of being able to take the function? What's the process of being able to take the function that you do at one point, you know what I'm saying, but at the same time take time away from that function to sort of restabilize your body and restabilize your body's functioning, right? So that's the important thing, that we want to really talk about here. And it's like, in order to do that, you have to be able to take, proper measurement and make proper calculations of just like your body's stability and its regulation, you know what I'm saying, overall, sometimes. And then just like from there, you take the functions of just what you do, and then you can sort of gauge and come up with how you can sort of start to implement more and more some of these functions, you know what I'm saying, that help regulate your peripheral nerve, help function your body and strengthen your body in specific ways that it's become accustomed to, right, from within the peripheral nervous system, right? You know what I'm saying? Indulging in specific peripheral nervous system activities, from working out to certain workouts and, functional trainings and, mental trainings, right? And even just like mental, I'll say just programming, you know what I'm saying? Mental programming and, even nutrition, right? These are all peripheral nervous system sort of consumptions, or just like indulgences that sort of shape and regulate your processes of thinking. So by indulging in these specific outlets and activities, you get to a point to where now your peripheral nervous system is functioning within a specific way that you initially that you've been established on, or more so established on, right? That might help you keep functioning your systems or your business, right? So finding a way to to be able to sort of take whatever benefit, business, or just manifestation that you have, like materializations that you have, right, in terms of like what you're doing, and take the processes of just like the spaces, environments, and just the sort of peripheral nervous system indulgences or activities that you've been established on, or that you have established, and just sort of finding a balance, or creating, finding a sort of a training regime, what I'm saying, to incorporate the essentials or the most important things, from each of the different avenues or aspects of it, and just being able to create a training regime that incorporates, what you would probably need, or just like, saying what you, feel you need, and the key points are just like or the details of all these, all of these specific points, right? And these specific outlets, and, taken from, all these specific outlets, in order to help process and not just function and regulate your body, but at the same time also be able to sort of just, process your functioning, right? And sort of like reinforce your functionality, right? In terms of like what you do. So taking a little bit from each and every individual one of these outlets is very important, is very essential, in order to make sure that is happening, right? Because like we said before, it's the peripheral nervous system functioning. So, so with that being said, it's not just that, but it's also body regulation, right? So it's like, with that being said, it's like, depending on like the environments that you've been in or been exposed to, how does this sort of negate and have an effect on terms of your thinking, from, the spaces that you've been in, right? Or the spaces that you, right? How does that sort of have an effect? And not just like the environment, but the experiences you had in those environments. You know what I'm saying? The experiments that that you sort of have to sort of recalibrate and sort of readjust or restabilize your body too, right? When you do get back in the original, or, the previous environment that you was in, right? So like we said before, the process of that is tricky, because, now that you've been you've been away from this certain peripheral nervous system functions for such a long time, or for a period of time, that it's now starting to have defects or negative effects in terms of just like, or you're starting to see the negative effects of being away from those sort of trainings, or those sort of indulgences or functions, that you was originally in, those outlets that you was originally in, and now you're starting to see sort of defects and weaknesses, simply because you're no longer in those same outlets and those same functions, right? Now, there's so many different ways I can go with this, but I'm gonna just say this, right? And because of that fact, you have to be able to take, you know what I'm saying? You have to be able to take, you have to be able to understand, the benefits of, your experiences, that you had, but at the same time, you have to be able to calculate and sort of monitor, analyze and monitor the weaknesses, and the sort of defects, right, that come from being away from certain functions, right, that you once been in, right, and from being able to monitor, those defects and analyze those defects, right, and the weaknesses in terms of being away from those functions. What are the cons of being away from those functions, right? What are the strengths that I'm missing? You know what I'm saying? And from there, and from being able to just monitor, right? Just properly monitor, right? Of course, and of course address, but monitor and observe, right? What those defects are, then you can sort of come up with and create processes that will allow you to be able to incorporate certain details, that incorporate those key points, certain key points that allow you to be able to, have these things, maybe at a much lesser scale, potentially, probably, maybe, and then at the same time be able to still regulate and stabilize your body, right, from other sort of fields or, dysfunctions, or just regulate your body from other things, right? Or regulate your body from other experiences that may have just previously taken place, right? In order for you to be, in order for you to be able to still sort of regulate your body, but at the same time still indulge or still incorporate a few of the details or key points of, these outlets or environments, right? That sort of, and that sort of contradict each other in terms of like what you would need in terms of regulate your body versus, what you need in terms of just like functionality, in terms of strengthening certain things, to make sure that you're getting the certain strength you need. So we're taking the two contradictory, portions and sort of putting them together. So, when you look at that aspect of it, you can look at your environment and say like, okay, in terms of functionality, in terms of, you can look at your outlets and say like, okay, in terms of my outlets, you know what I'm saying? Outlets are used, the outlets that I indulge in on a consistent basis, almost like not almost like a profession, you know, is like what carries me through different environments and transcend through different environments, right? I go into this environment, I keep the same function. I go into this environment, I keep the same function. Or, you know what I'm saying? It's the same thing with just environments, you know what I'm saying? I'm in an environment building a certain thing, right? You know, a business, you know what I'm saying? And as certain other functions change, I mean, it's still the business, you know what I'm saying? It's still the overall business. So, you look at this, you look at nutrition, you know, you look at other things as well, training, I guess, you know, I guess maybe not training, but maybe the two other things I just said, right? And you look at those two things and you look at it and say like, okay, so functionality, you look at functionality and you look at environments, and you just look at the overall just like purpose of what you do and see that it's the vehicle that channels you through irregularities, or not irregularities, more like just differences and adjustments. So you get channeled through different like adjustments and different like you know different changes in just like life and stuff, right? But you keep the same functionality. You know what I'm saying? So this is what's building, I guess, building you in certain ways, because now certain functionalities of you upgrade. You know what I'm saying? Because now, you know, you're in a functionality, you know, your overall function in terms of like what you're progressing upgrades, because this is where, you know, you may see like indifferences or imbalances and other things, but you can take the positive of just the different environments and different other things that you might sort of encounter and build off of those things, right? You know what I'm saying? So that's how you can, whether it's a business in terms of environment or whether it's just a function, right? Whether it's just, you know, functionality in terms of a skill, right? A skill. So things are being built, you know what I'm saying, based on the changes, I guess, in the overall changes of just like other things from across the board, you know, certain things are being built, right? And it may be having a negative effect on your body and regulation, but it's building specific things, right? This is a whole different sort of, this is not really, this is out of context. This is not in the same context, but this is just a lesson, right? You know what I'm saying? That's another thing as well, right? That's just a point I was making, right? That not in the context of just the overall structure of this video specifically, but that's an important context, right? Important concept, right? Important concept, you know, to know, right? So when you take that aspect of it and you look at it, and it's just like, you know, certain things, man, you know, can be built, you know, through your peripheral nervous system. And, you know, you may be establishing yourself on certain peripheral nervous system functions, right? Whether it be environmental in terms of like business or systems, or whether it just be in terms of a functionality like a skill. You know, your peripheral nervous system is built on these specific things. And, you know, some things are more important, or some things are harder than others. Some things are more strengthened than others, more reinforced than others, because they're the main piece, right? They're the core, or they're the pride, right? That's the pride. That's the pride. You know, that's the nucleus. You know what I'm saying? Whether it be basketball, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm a basketball player. This is my skill. You know what I'm saying? I got my skills, and my skills is what's most important to me. You know what I'm saying? Or if it's just business, and it's just like, okay, this business is what it is, right? And it's environmental. You know what I'm saying? That could be a thing too. So it's like, you know, you look at these things, and it's just like, you look at these things and you look at the peripheral nervous system, and it's just like, okay, so I'm taking the peripheral nervous system, right? And throughout the different changes in my nutrition, whether I fast, you know what I'm saying, from certain things, and I start to lose sort of vitamins, or I start to lose benefits in certain things, you know what I'm saying? But I gain benefits of other things, right? You know what I'm saying? Whether in terms of my nutrition, in terms of my training regimes, I change up my training regimes, certain things I lose, because I stopped doing them. And there's certain things I gain, and I'm monitoring the things that I'm losing, right? The nutrients that I'm losing, right? That helps my overall functionality, right? And I'm monitoring the things I'm losing in terms of overall functionality in these things. And I'm monitoring what I'm losing in terms of the overall functioning, in terms of environmentals, right? In terms of environmentals, I'm monitoring the things that I'm losing or the things that I'm gaining in terms of environmental from doing certain things, or fasting from certain things, or creating new training regimes. And I look at this, right? I look at this aspect of it, and I can see, like, okay, so if I get into a new process or a specific process, right? How can I make sure that I'm able to run this business or run this system, right? By making sure that I'm getting the proper certain things, right? Even though I may, I guess hold off on other things due to, body regulation or circumstance, right? I may hold off on certain things. How do I make sure that I'm still getting certain things in order for me to be able to function, this system correctly, and even just the system of my own body correctly, right? And my own functioning, correctly. How do I make sure that I can function these sort of things, right? Even though I might be missing out on other fluctual things, that helped establish, this process, right? And that's the major question, from within the peripheral nervous system, right? Which all of this stuff is built on, from the peripheral nervous system, what things, what things from the peripheral nervous system am I losing, within outlets, right? What sort of details, what strengths, what pros are being lost, or benefits are being lost from certain outlets and activities, And by understanding what specific things are being lost, right? What certain strengths and what sort of benefits are being lost, right? In order to get some sort of bodily regulation in terms of rest, your mind, mental regulation, and that sort of thing, when you can see and sort of gauge what things are being lost, right? And just monitoring, being observant to that, then you can sort of take, what's being lost, and make informed decisions, on how you want to proceed, and sort of like coming up with some sort of regime or plan to incorporate some of those details or key points that will allow you to receive some of those strengths, for the time being that you are recovering, or for the time being that you are sort of, regulating yourself, and that's the important thing. Thinking like an athlete, and that sort of thing, right? That's the important thing, right there. Is how can you gain certain things from certain strengths, to make sure that you have it. But at the same time, even though you're not getting other things, or within the peripheral nervous system, even though you're not getting like other sort of things within that time frame, how are you sort of regulating your body, and setting yourself up so that you can, get those things back. And that's the sort of thing that we wanted to really talk about in this video right here. It's just certain strengths that you aren't getting, or might not be getting due to some sort of bodily regulation. And it's just like, okay, making sure that what sort of key points that can I get, You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Even though it's, just even if it's just for the time being, you know what I'm saying, that it helps me be able to sort of still regulate my body, the bare minimum, I guess, regulate my body to its full extent, but still, intaking and consuming the functionality, you know what I'm saying, from the peripheral nervous system that I need and that I've been established on, right? You know what I'm saying? To help me just keep, regulating, right? That sort of thing. So that's number one. That's point number one. And then point number two is for not just functionality, environmental, of course. Point two actually, nutrition. I'll say, nutrition. You know what I'm saying? Certain nutrients and things. The certain nutrients that I wasn't getting, that I'm not. You know what I'm saying? Or the certain strengths that come from certain nutritional aspects. How can I make sure that I'm getting those things, right? You know what I'm saying? Or not just getting them fully, but maybe just enough, or just a bare minimum, or just a little bit of it. You know what I'm saying? That can help me to still recalibrate, or sort of calibrate my body to be at a certain state, right? Calibrate my body at a certain state. So, and if I'm calibrating my body at a certain state, it's just like that's the important thing, right? That we wanted to say, right? And then from there, looking at environmental spaces, because it's not just calibrating our body, right? It's it's recalibrating our body from other experiences and other things that may have taken place. You know what I'm saying? And we're recalibrating our body, and you know what I'm saying, we're recalibrating our body and calibrating our body from many different things, right? When it's in terms of our nutrition, right? And then it's like, from all these different things that might be happening or are happening, how can we sort of regulate our body, right? Whether we're not getting enough nutrition, or whether we're just dealing with just, I guess, sort of dysfunctions that kind of contradict each other in terms of how, solution-wise, right? Problems that, generate, or that have solutions that contradict each other. So how do we sort of deal with that, right? And that's all we're dealing with when we talk about, like, all of this stuff, right? We're dealing with how do you manage contradictions to solutions, right? That's all it is. That's all it is, right? It's effects, and there's recalibrations, and then there's contradictions to recalibrations, and contradictions is just solutions. So it's just managing that, right? So in order to that sort of thing, and that's, or in order to do that, you look at the like we said, you look at your nutrition, and you look at the effects of certain things, and you sort of just come up with a process that helps you sort of make sure you get the nutrition that you need, and all the vitamins that you need, and sometimes just the bare minimum, you know what I'm saying, in order to make sure that you're doing what you need to do, and how that sort of regulation sort of coincides with your functionality as well, like mentally and physically. And it's a sort of balance. Some things require patience, robbing yourself of certain things at a time, in order to gain. Because like we talked about before, like certain things, right, are in the long run, right? Certain things you do now will help you out more in the long run. It's not an immediate thing, you know what I'm saying? And it's just like I'll say this, right? Just like with functionality in terms of just like basketball, or a skill, that you commit to, certain things around that skill change, but overall, it all comes back and helps the skill. So with nutrition, I want to put that in I want that to, I guess, ring in the context of nutrition. You know what I'm saying? Saying, ring in the context of nutrition. Just certain things you need, of course: vitamin C, omega-3, vitamin B12, vitamin A, right? You know what I'm saying? Antimicrobials, anti-inflammation, right? During the winter times, and allergy seasons. So this is like, you look at these things, and of course, just straight up protein and straight up just meats, just plant-based, or I would say just carbs, right? Nutrients, right? Just nutrients in its form, like, nutrients. So of course you have that aspect of it, and then it's just like, okay, so I'm making sure I'm getting all these different things, and it's just like, okay, so if I can get all these different things, then it's just like, yeah, nice. It's like, okay, I'm making sure I get all these different things, and I'm regulating all these different things, and my functionality is better. Sometimes I may be seeing in terms of my preventives, sometimes I may be seeing defects, some other aspects, to regulate the body, what I'm saying? And even just subjugate it to and have it fit the form of a function, right? Or a plan or some sort of, intention, what I'm saying? And have it fit some sort of intention, what I'm saying? And I might rob myself of certain, nutrients, because of just the time, right? And just the intention in terms of, what we're trying to do, right? So, with all this stuff kind of going on, all these different sort of, regulations and regularities and regularities, it's like, you have to sort of just monitor, what's being gained and what's being lost from within the peripheral nervous system, depending on what your intention is and what you're trying to do, whether it's to rest and recalibrate from an environmental space, or whether it's to sort of calibrate, your body to fit a specific functionality or intention, maybe even to a specific environment or outlet, right? And, based on that, it's just like, how are you calibrating or recalibrating your body, your peripheral nervous system, due to like your nutrition, what you're eating? Are you taking more vitamin C, more omega-3, more of this sort of thing? And like, what is being left out, right? And what are the defects of what is being left out? What's going to be the defects, right? In terms of leaving out those things, and are those things even worth leaving out in the first place, right? Or would it just be better for you to just not do that, right? And just, that sort of thing. Would it just be better for you to just not do that and just perform to the complete general, the general raw growth state of, your body, you know what I'm saying? Which is sometimes not the best case. That's that, right? And then same with functioning in terms of your training, which is like pretty much never the case, right? It's just like, training is like never the case where you should be training in a gross state, or like just a complete like gross and just like original regulated state, pretty much every time, like, you should be sort of conforming to a function when you train, right? And it's like, okay, so what is your body accustomed to, right? And what's being lost, right? And how can you sort of make this sort of adjustment and regulation to, what's being lost, depending on like what your body is accustomed to in terms of training, versus just like what it needs in order to function within whatever outlet that it's, in, right? So that's the sort of thing, that we wanted to, sort of emphasize in this video, you can sort of see the difference between like when it's nutrition versus when it's like functional training. And environmental is the last thing we wanted to talk about in this video. You know what I'm saying? Is an environmental thing, right? So environmentally, like when you get into certain environments, what's the sort of regularity to that? Like, what's the difference maker? What's the sort of like, benefit of that environment? And just like, what's the benefit of, you being, what's the sort of irregularity or the regularity of you being in that environment, or those outlets, or even those mental programmings, that you would probably need, in order to function better, right? The mental programming that you might be taking in, or at that specific time in order for you to perform to that function, might just as well coincide and go against, you're out, go against, what the regularities of your own systems in your own body, right? You know what I'm saying? That's another thing. Sometimes the mental programs you get into can do the same thing, just as the functional trainings you do, and just as the nutrition that you have, right? And it's the same thing all over again. What are you taking in, and what are you not taking in, and that sort of thing is just having an effect on your, what I'm saying, the regulation is the regularity of your body, right? Because you might be resting from a specific outlet and then taking certain mental programming, right, that might actually have a backwards effect, or a backwards influence in terms of just like what you need at that current moment. So that's another thing, right? From the, from your nervous system, from your nervous system's training. So that's another thing that's going to have to be calculated and regulated, just like environmental training. You look at the defects, right? I'm used to being mentally programmed this way or this way or this way and functioning this way. Okay, so if I'm not functioning this way, then what am I missing? What's being lost and what's being missed that I usually have and it's usually there? And how can I make that adjustment so I can sort of get key points of it, And then at the same time, I guess just like for that time being, while I regulate the rest of myself, right? While I focus on my intention in terms of regulating my body so that I can jump back and get back into my overall intention and the task in terms of what I'm doing, right? Just like the thing, like the athlete thing we said. And then last but not least, environmental, You get out of an environment and go into a different space, and you may experience some things that you sort of need regularity to, and it's like you look at those irregularities or, that you may need, and then you just say like, hey, let me go ahead and regulate, my body this, let me go ahead when I get back into this environment or this outlet, let me sort of regulate my body back to that outlet, or to that environment. But at the same time, as you sort of do that, or even as you take a rest or function a specific way, you may lose certain things. You know what I'm saying? You might lose certain things that you may need just by integrating with a certain environment, right? And if that's the case, then it's just like, okay. If that's the case, then it's just like, okay, how do I make that adjustment? Just like we said with the mental programming, how do we make that adjustment? How do you make that adjustment in terms of just like, how do you make that adjustment in terms of just, how do you make that adjustment in terms of, mental programming, or environmental, right? You know what I'm saying? How do you make that environmental adjustment? You in a whole, you back in the same environment, you know what I'm saying, that you was in. And then, now it's just like, this is the environment that you're used to performing to and performing for, right? You know what I'm saying? And now you have to sort of reintegrate and recalibrate yourself back to that environment. But at the same time, you need rest. You need bodily recalibration. You know what I'm saying? So how do you make sure that you're still sort of reintegrating yourself back with the environment that you need to reintegrate yourself back with, right? Or the environment that you used to perform into, or just period that you need to reintegrate yourself back with, but at the same time, be able to regulate your own body. You know what I'm saying? And what processes can you create in order for you to be taking, sort of key points from that environment, you know what I'm saying, to regulate your body, you know what I'm saying, a little bit, just for the time being, as you sort of recalibrate your body with rest. And that is the crucial question we're trying to ask on each and every individual one of these points, from environmental, right? Environmental being, how do I take certain key points from my environment, for the time being, you know what I'm saying, while I still sort of recalibrate my body to this specific intention, you know what I'm saying, for the time being, right? And then be able to sort of fluctuate, when that recalibration happens, right? Or when that recalibration is finished. Same thing with mental programming. How can I take a little bit from these mental programming, right? Certain key points that I need, right, from mental programming without sort of jeopardizing my recalibration in terms of my body. You know what I'm saying? That way I can recalibrate my body. I can still fulfill my intention, you know what I'm saying, at the current moment in terms of recalibration of my body, you know what I'm saying, that sort of thing, right? But at the same time, taking just the bare minimum in terms of key points that I need at that moment, right? Before I then gain access to more, right? More of what I need from those mental programmings, right? And then also doing the same thing for in terms of mental programming and in terms of just details that I may need and whatever specific, for whatever functionality that I might actually be committed to, right? In terms of my functionality, right? The mental programmings I need for that functionality. How can I take from those deep, little, tiny key points from those, right? For the time being, so that I can still have them and get those while I recalibrate my body. And it's the same thing with functionality in terms of training, functional training, or, training and functionality, right? How can I take a little bit, just a little bit, right, of these, or just key points of it, right? Maybe not the whole thing at that moment, but key points of it that allow me, to sustain my functionality within my peripheral nervous system at that time that I'm recalibrating my body, right? You know what I'm saying? Just for that period. And then, as I, when my body gets, when I'm able to finish my intention in terms of recalibration or whatever, you know what I'm saying, the case may be, from environment or whatever it may be, then I can sort of reintegrate myself completely, fully back into, the process of that training, you know what I'm saying, functional training and stuff, right? And then at the last point, how can I sort of reintegrate my peripheral nervous system back with nutrition and the nutrients that I'm getting, right? That way I can sort of regulate my body that way, right? And sort of hit that sort of recalibration, that way I can make sure I'm getting all the essential vitamins that I need, that serve a specific purpose in my body and strengthening my body and my brain, mind, from vitamin C, vitamin A, omega-3, you know what I'm saying? And certain inflammatory, inflammation, fighting vitamins or nutrients, nutrition, and certain antimicrobials and, other things, of that nature, right? How can I make sure I'm gaining all of these different things that help with vision, clarity, all this stuff, right? All of these key points, right? But at the same time, regulating my body. You know what I'm saying? Keep, fulfilling my initial intent in terms of keeping my body regulated, right? To a specific point, right? While making sure that I'm taking care of, just a full calibration in terms of what my body needs, right? And, on the nutritional aspect, right? And that aspect of it. So without further ado, I think I'm going to conclude this video right here. I think we touched on all these points like as hard as we possibly could. And I think we went in pretty good depth to like in terms of like what we're trying to accomplish and do when we talk about recalibrating our body from specific spaces. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of monitoring, right? It takes a lot of just detail in terms of looking at these sort of things and saying, okay, so let me take a little bit of these things, right, at the time being as I recalibrate my body, you know what I'm saying, to make sure I'm getting them in terms of my mental programming, but at the same time recalibrating my own body. You know what I'm saying? That way I can have my body like, you know what I'm saying, functioning right. But at the same time, me getting out of, saying my body, but at the same time, me making sure that I'm getting the bare minimum of just my functionality in terms of how I function, right? I'm getting the bare minimum of my functionality, or what I need to function right. You know what I'm saying? In order for me to be able to recalibrate my body and take my rest days that I need, at the same time as, still being on par, recalibrated in order to function, right?